Welcome to another exciting show. Now, coming up shortly is John Hamer, and he's waiting in the wings here, ready to come on to the show. So, I'll introduce him. Hello, John.
Hello, Chris. Long time no see.
That's right. Now, first of all, got a couple of call-outs to do. See,
I've got one as well, if I may, afterwards. Yeah.
So, well, do you want to come in first or second? You can come in.
I'd just like to say hello to Janine if you're watching. We met earlier today, and you said you were interested in this stuff. So, hi.
Well, I haven't met you, so hello, Janine. And tune, Janine, with your eyes so blue. Was that?
It was Denny.
Denny, sorry.
Denny.
Getting a bit of a mucking fuddle there. I'm getting my worms in the puddle. Well, first of all, today I've been along to a very interesting place. No dirty words, please. No, what it was is that I've discovered it's not very far from where I live, actually, and it's called Abbey Health Foods, and they're absolutely brilliant because, as you probably know, my personal view about, shall we say, the health system, how can I say this without getting banned? The large brigade, brigade, they've really shown themselves up. And to me, it's the lack of health, because it's all fear and doom and gloom. Death, worry, check this, do that. But I don't call it alternative health. I call it the natural health is, we can help you. Let's try. And it's all positive. And I've found that the NHS is negative and real health is positive. And that's my own personal view. Okay. And this is not the view of the people I went to today. It might be, but I'll make that clear because I don't want to get them into trouble. Okay. And I went on to this lovely shop in Waltham Abbey. And it's very quaint. It really is. It's a bit like shall we say, it's not as good as the Shambles in York, but it's a bit like that. It's a bit oldie-worldy, and it has a fantastic atmosphere in the shop. And the chap, I'm actually going to go there to sort out my nerves and stress, because I suffer from stress. And it's something I've got to really get a grip on, because when I was a kid, if someone clapped their hands, I'd dive under a table and go, ah! Like this. And it's something, stress you've got to really deal with. And this chappie, here he is, Miles Fleetwood, and it's a very, very bad scan. The reason why is his card is in blue, and blue doesn't scan very well. That's why I've had a lot of problems with it, but he is absolutely brilliant. And he is so good. He's a nutritionist, herbalist, acupuncturist. What he doesn't know about health isn't worth knowing anyway. And the earliest I can get in to see him is in November. That's how, and he doesn't have to advertise. That's how good he is. That is an advert, isn't it? In its own.
Good for him.
So,
very. Is he watching tonight? Is he watching tonight, Chris?
I sincerely hope so.
Hi, Miles.
Hello, Miles. And also, thank you for Marina, his assistant there, who gave me a lot of advice, and I came away with some potions not potions, no, I came with a lot of vitamins and that. So next week I should be, hey. Now, before we start this evening's program, you see, there's a lot of things that's been edited out of history. For example, now, if there's any children around, I'm going to use a few rude words. So tell them to fuck off out, and that they won't hear the rude words, okay? So Now, that is the word we're looking at, you see. The F word has been erased from history, you see. Now, it was first erased from King Harold because his last words were, where are those fucking arrows coming from? And then, of course, we go over to General Custer, the Battle of Bighorn, and where's those fucking Indians coming from? And of course, can you guess who said, where's all this effing water coming from? Yes, it was the captain of the Titanic. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Chris. Another wonderful introduction. Yeah,
And if you believe that, believe anything.
yeah. Well, as the title of the show suggests, obviously we're going to be talking about the Titanic tonight. Now, for those of you not aware, and those of you not heard me speak about the Titanic before, I mean, Titanic is my specialist subject. I studied it for 3 years solid. I didn't do anything else. I didn't have a job. That's all I did. I just studied I just researched the Titanic, and my findings were that, just tell you this, just right from the off the bat, for those of you who've not heard me speak before, because I've done a lot of podcasts about the Titanic, but for some reason, Chris and I have never covered it. But there are lots of videos of me speaking about the Titanic all over the internet. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, I spent 3 years researching it from 2010 to 2013, culminating in me doing again, for those of you who haven't seen it, and maybe some of you have, because it's had a lot of views, I did a presentation at New Horizons in St Anne's in Lancashire. And that kind of went viral. And I got actually contacted by a lady who was this is cutting a very long story short, a lady who was a Hollywood film director. She invited me over to Hollywood so that we could together troll the producers that she knew and pitch our story to them, and hopefully with the idea of making a film about the real Titanic story as opposed to the utter garbage, and it is utter garbage that you hear every day, with regards to what really happened with the Titanic. So yeah, I kind of, it's very immodest of me to say this, but I kind of regard myself as a worldwide authority on Titanic, because I've written 2 books about it, as some of you may know anyway, and some of you may even have read the books. I don't know. Yeah. So, I mean, the official story is that Titanic hit the iceberg at 11:40 p.m. on Sunday, the 14th of April, 1912, and sank at approximately 2:20 a.m. on Monday, the 15th of April, 1912, local time. So where did I get all my information from? I think it's probably as well to kind of cover that first. Well, I looked at the transcripts of there were 2 public inquiries, one American, one British. I looked at the transcripts of those and gleaned a lot of useful stuff out of that. I went to Belfast and I looked at Harland and Wolff public records in Belfast Library and various archives. I even went to the Bodleian Library in Oxford, which is the only place where all the transcripts of the wireless communications between the Marconi wireless operators on the ships are kept. I mean, there are excerpts from that on the internet, but the only place where you can get the full story is the Bodleian Library in Oxford, and I suspect that they will never go on the internet because of the incriminating aspect of them, shall we say. I also went to various other libraries, looked at contemporary newspaper clippings on microfiche, and obviously the ubiquitous internet as well. Now, interestingly, the story that you all, or most people, I'm not saying you all, I guess you guys are a bit more savvy than that, but the story that most people think is the truth was actually taken from a book that was written in the early 1950s called A Night to Remember. And you may remember the feature film later in the 1950s that starred Kenneth More, the British actor. Now, that story was written by a guy called Walter Lord. Now, he was an American, he trained as a lawyer, but he was actually a CIA agent. Now, the first thing that struck me about the whole thing was, why on earth would a story about a shipwreck 40 years previously, as it was then, be written by a CIA agent? Well, let's see. First of all, let me just say there are two separate strands to this story, okay? And I will cover them both, but there's a lot of swapping about, so it's not a simple story. It's quite complex. So please do bear with me. But by all means, feel free to ask questions in chat as you always do, I guess. But okay, so let's start at the very beginning. In 1908, a gentleman by the name of J.P. Morgan, who was head of a huge conglomerate financial corporation of the same name, which exists today, was also the owner of the White Star shipping line, to which Titanic belonged. Okay. And he decided to build three, not one, but three luxury liners with the idea of becoming the most luxurious ships in the world. And these, in chronological order, were the Olympic, RMS Olympic, RMS Titanic, and RMS Britannic. Now, they were all ostensibly identical, but not quite. Okay, so there were some differences because they kind of made improvements as time went on, because obviously it took a long time to build each one. So anyway, there were, suffice to say, there were differences. So he commissioned a company called Harland and Wolff in Belfast, which was the shipyard that built these ships. And by the way, Harland and Wolff worked exclusively with the White Star Line at that time. So he commissioned them to begin construction in 1908. And the first one off the production line was going to be RMS Olympic, which was Titanic's big sister. Big in terms of age rather than size, because as I said, they were more or less identical. So for this, there was a massive investment of money required. I mean, in today's money, we're talking billions, yeah? So these were huge, huge entities. You know, they were the largest moving objects ever built at that time. Okay, so and it was financed by J.P. Morgan personally. So it was a huge gamble for him. This plan that he devised depended on absolutely everything going right. And if even a tiny aspect of it went wrong, it would have caused him chaos. But I'm getting ahead of myself. As we'll see, as the story develops, the entire enterprise was beset with problems right from the off. And obviously, ultimately, ending in tragedy, of course. Now, as I said, RMS Olympic was the first of the three sisters to be built. That was launched in 1911. But unfortunately for Morgan and his pocket, she had several serious accidents. 4, in fact, all before the launch of the Titanic. So, in other words, all in the first few months of Olympic's life. Number one, on her maiden voyage, she destroyed a tug in New York Harbor, New York docks. And White Star Line was sued. It was deemed to be their fault. Fortunately, no deaths occurred and not that much damage to the ship, actually. The tug was not sunk, but it was a write-off. It was destroyed. But as I say, there wasn't that much damage to Olympic because obviously, you know, it was a big beast. And then a few weeks later, it ran over a sunken wreck off Sandy Hook, which some of you may recognise as another false flag incident, you know, the Sandy Hook school shootings. Again, that's just near the exit to New York Harbor, and this caused severe damage to the propellers. And it returned back across the Atlantic at about half speed, but suffered further vibrational damage due to the imbalance caused by the propeller damage, which is a pretty standard thing. And 2 propellers had to be replaced. Okay, accident number 3. Again, near New York, she hit a sandbank, ran aground and threw a propeller, which means that she lost the propeller. And this also had to be replaced, but having used both spares already, they had to borrow one from the Titanic, which was still under construction. This particular point is quite significant, and we'll return to this point later in the story. So, Chris, please make a note. If I forget, I probably won't, but if I do, please remind me to return to the propeller issue when we get to talking about the aftermath.
Yes, that's
Thank you.
Okay.
Right, and then the big one. In September 1911, so I mean, Olympic was only kind of 6 months old, not even that, 5 months old by this stage. In September 1911, she was involved in a massive, and I mean a massive, high-speed collision with a British naval cruiser called HMS Hawke, which is known in Titanic circles as the Hawke incident. This was just as she left Southampton water and preparing to turn westwards to travel clockwise around the Isle of Wight. Now, the Hawke was actually coming clockwise as well, but like around the north side of the Isle of Wight, and hit her amidships. And the damage was absolutely massive. So obviously the voyage was abandoned, all the passengers were shipped, back home or whatever, back to wherever they came from. And the ship itself had to limp back to Southampton to be patched up. Now, this took 2 weeks, just a patch-up operation. And from there, back to Harland and Wolff, Belfast, for full repairs. They couldn't do the full repairs at Southampton because there was no dry dock large enough to take her. Don't forget, this was the biggest ship in the world at this point. It was the largest moving object ever built. So the only dry dock big enough to take her was what's called the Thompson Graving Dock in Belfast, where she'd been built. Right, so they got her back to Belfast, and then it was very quickly realised that she was in far worse shape than originally thought. And then worse still, and don't forget, at this point in time, she was unable to start earning, she was unable to earn the revenues that the company needed to keep it afloat. So this massive investment. So she was out of action for another 2 months. And then worse still, the Royal Navy inquiry, because every time there's an accident involving a Royal Navy ship, there has to be a Royal Naval inquiry. And of course, this inquiry found Olympic's crew, and therefore the White Star Line, culpable. And so White Star was not only liable for the many millions of pounds worth of expenses for repairs to both ships, but also the significant loss of revenues whilst Olympic was out of action. So White Star Line was falling into a massive black financial hole. Okay, obviously Morgan's other financial interests were fine, but his investments in this particular element of his financial portfolio were very rapidly going down the drain. Now, amongst many, many other relatively minor issues, the major problem with Olympic was that the keel was bent and distorted out of shape. The repairs were estimated to cost more than to build a new ship from scratch. I actually spoke to several marine experts and the marine insurance expert, and they all said that a twisted and bent keel was a total wreck. It's irreparable. It's just like if you had a really bad accident in your car and it was an insurance write-off. That is exactly what happened to Olympic. They realised that Olympic was damaged beyond economic repair, and significantly that she was now uninsurable, and therefore an insurance write-off. So White Star Line had absolutely no option but to declare her officially as a wreck, and that actually did happen. They declared her a wreck. Olympic was officially declared a wreck. Right. Also, due to the serious damage that she sustained, she was unable to play a trade, as I said, back and forth across the Atlantic any longer to begin to pay her way. And the bankruptcy of White Star Line and Harland and Wolff would definitely be on the cards. Harland and Wolff, because, as I said earlier, Harland and Wolff was the sole, White Star was Harland and Wolff's sole customer. Yeah. So I believe that at this point, JP Morgan, and his co-conspirators then hatched a plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Solve the White Star financial problems and remove opposition to the Federal Reserve Bank. Let me go to thread number 2 now. In 1910, there was a plot hatched in America amongst high financiers to emulate the British Bank of England and create something in America that they were going to call the Federal Reserve Bank, which is actually the American central bank, just as the Bank of England is the British central bank. Now, the thing about central banks is, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but I've covered this in other elements of my work, is that the central banks are not governmental institutions. They are all privately owned, privately shareholders. And I know a lot of you guys out there already know this, but this is just for the benefit of those who don't. So the Americans saw an opportunity to grab some more profits, purely by dint of the way central banks work, and that is creating money out of thin air. So, as I said, this was intended to solve the White Star financial problems and remove opposition to the Federal Reserve, which was very great. There was a big faction fighting the Federal Reserve plan. So this was going to eliminate those in one simple move. You want to go into chat, Chris?
Certainly. This is fascinating. There's a question that we will never be able to answer. Mm-hmm. And I wonder whether the Olympic was actually what they call a voodoo ship. And what happens because of that it had a double skin hull. Sometimes people get trapped in these holes in between the two skins. This happened with a Brunel ship, the one that they couldn't.
Great Western or the Great Eastern.
The one that was built off in the Thames and that have steam hammers to launch it.
Great Eastern.
Great Eastern, I think it was it?
Yeah, it's Great Eastern. Yeah.
Great Eastern, and that was a voodoo ship. They actually found a skeleton in there, there was a case. It was actually on that. I don't want to go too far off the track, but there was a U-boat that was haunted, and it was covered in a play in the 1950s, which you can still see on YouTube, where they found a skeleton with a spanner in its hand in between the holes. Who got trapped down there, not skeleton but a human being, and the crew kept hearing this spanner being bashed against the side of the hull, and it was that was a haunted ship. So that may have been what we call a voodoo ship. But we go into chat, and we've got a lot in chat now. Please excuse me, ladies and gents, because I'm going to have to hop, skip, and jump. There's so many in chat.
Yeah.
And first of all, Yorkshire Rose kindly put something up in chat before we started, and so did quite a few other people. And then suddenly, her message disappeared. I don't know why. I mean, did you delete it, Yorkshire Rose? I just don't know what happened, because it'd be nice to read out, but I can't because it disappeared. And that happened the week before, a couple of weeks earlier. So I don't know what's going on. Also, please excuse me if I don't answer all your comments at once. It's politeness to answer every comment. And please excuse me if it is, because we're getting quite a lot now. I like it. John answers them as well. Now, we got here Flat Earth. I'm all up to date with the Titanic insurance swap, so I'm here just to cause trouble.
Go for it, mate.
Right, we got the Soul Spread, right? Who is who? Other know the truth. Who is who? And then we've got Kevin Keener. Hi, Chris and John. And
hi, Kevin.
Justin Weathers. The YouTube. Oh, isn't that kind? Thank you. Dream team. Nice to see you both. Much respect to you. Right.
Hi, Justin.
And then we've got Ralph Winter. Evening, Chris and John.
Hi, Ralph.
And it's freaking hot tonight. Yes. Well, it's probably the ghost of Morgan listening in. He's up there going, woo! And when I was talking about the National Health Service, National Homicide. That's a cracker, that one. National Homicide. Spot on there. Bloody spot on. Smokes and green. Yeah, that's an idea. I'll tell you something. I'd like to thank the number of people walking around with oxygen suppressors on, because they're obviously so ugly they don't want you to see their face. It's so nice because it puts you off your dinner, doesn't it, if you see ugly people?
Masturbators.
Yes, that's right. Oh, hello, Suzanne. All right, the book fight on Sunday. Yeah.
Sorry, Suzanne, I missed that. I didn't say that. It was a bit far away from me.
Hi, guys. Did anyone else see the large red dinosaur floating over Cheshunt today? Somebody said it was a sun, but I think it's a conspiracy theory. I haven't seen it for a long time. But, by the way, between you and I, just keep it to yourself. What a bike. Carbon fibre. And I think it was hand built to her specifications. It was like cycling. She gave me, do you want to have a go? It's like cycling a Rolls, well, not a Rolls Royce, so they're not the best, but shall we say, this is the creme de la creme of bikes. And I was actually worried about, I didn't change gear or anything because I worried about doing something wrong, but what a ride bike. Wow. You got a good bike there. I wouldn't leave it chained up outside Tesco's if I was you. I don't think it lasts very long. Hello, everyone. Louise.
Hi, Louise.
Yorkshire Rose. Hello, Yorkshire Rose. And you're in Justin, what's his name there? Castro land. Oh, sorry. I mean, Trudeau. Because, you know, his daddy was supposed to be Castro. Hello, everyone. Chris. This is very kind. Cherry juice is good for stress.
It's good for gout as well. Montmorency cherry.
Really? I've got a cherry tree opposite where I live. Montmorency. And that as well, cherry, if you can get it. I don't know where you can get it. I don't know. I've never eaten. So cherry juice. Oh, I'll have a look into that. Thank you, Yorkshire Rose. I've tried almost everything else. And hello, Chris and John. Looking forward to this. Yes, yeah. So we, aren't we? Right, Hatchie. Hi from Southampton. Did the Titanic dock there?
That's where it sailed from, and it's made and it's maiden voyage, and it's own voyage. Well, no, not really.
Remember, I've joined Low IQ Pride movement. Right, if they had the Screwfix back book, he likes that Screwfix gag, doesn't he? If they had the Screwfix bag back in the day, laugh out loud, the boiler room might not have gone.
Does Screwfix sell 1-inch thick steel plates then? You know, kind of 20 foot by 40 foot in dimension. I didn't realise that, actually.
No, actually, no. I thought it was a dating catalogue, and there's nothing about dating in it at all.
An internet dating site.
Sure, Rose. Oh, I'm getting some good advice here. This is good. This is. And CBD oil is good for stress. Yes, you can get that in Holland and Barrett, but the trouble is, I noticed the percentage of it is so small. I think you could probably go to Holland and sort of go, breathe in and probably get more.
Well, the problem with Holland and Barrett is that although they're a health food store, they're only a health food store within certain parameters, not real health food. You know, you can get some things. But...
Well, let's put it this way. This is a real health food shop.
Yeah.
Because they sell real health food.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about the real good stuff.
Yeah.
Because you know that vitamin C, if you buy it in supermarkets, it's not vitamin C. You'd probably get more vitamin C sniffing an orange than you would from that. But they can call it vitamin C, but it's not vitamin C.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go on a super dose of it, man. Hey. Where am I? I've lost myself. Right, here we go. We've got a good customer here. Read John's books. If you want it, in his words, awesome read, the Olympic.
Thank you, Louise. Glad you enjoyed it.
Good. Check in the post, mate. You know. Paul Green, saw your Titanic talk at the event in Sussex last December.
Ah, right. I didn't realise you were there, Paul. Right. Hi.
And we got Justin Withers. Get them likes up. With these guys, you can hit like as soon as the show starts, and no, it's going to be worth it. Oh, no, it's going to be worth it. Oh, I know what you mean. Yes. Oh, it's very kind. Thank you very much. What's his full name? And this geezer, it's ugly git, he answered it. Your name is Steve at the moment. He's the author. There we got it. Sorry, genitals. Evening, genitals. Sorry, I'm late.
Well, it makes a change from the ladies, I suppose. Thank you, mate. Yeah.
Yes. It's not a cock and ball story, is it? Sorry. Right. There we got here. Ralph Winters, this is interesting. In 1939, Alfred Hitchcock's first Hollywood film was set to be the Titanic story. But on the eve of the Second World War, hang on a minute, I think we're going to go on to the next bit now. British officials objected to a film portraying a notorious maritime disaster. And Hitchcock made a Rebecca, 1940, instead.
Thanks, Ralph. I didn't realise that. That's interesting. Thank you.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
No,
Because the first one, the acting was so bad, it would make amateur dramatics look good. I mean, that was one in the 20s, wasn't it? No, 30s. It was first talkies. Yorkshire Rose, interesting one. Couldn't Morgan claim insurance when the Olympic was declared a wreck? That's
great question. Great question, Yorkshire Rose. But the answer is sadly no, because the Royal Naval Inquiry found against Olympic and they were deemed responsible for the accident. Just as if you would be responsible for an accident in your car, you can't claim on the insurance. You have to pay for it yourself, and that is exactly what happened.
Oh, isn't this lovely what Kat's put? Thank you so much. What a kind person. Everybody's kind. Let's support the show with a like. Oh, that's very kind. That's very, very thoughtful. Thank you very much, Kat. That is excellent. Thank you. No, I didn't delete it. Oh, that was the question. Or was it a question? It was something you put at the beginning. I wonder if I'm being monitored. We all are.
Join the club.
Yes. I mean, my website, Fockham Hall, has been cyber attacked. Oh, by the way, whilst I was in the health food shop, people are asking about passports for Fockham Hall. So I might actually do that. We can download them and see if you can get away with it when people ask for ID. So, yes, I'm a Fockham Hall citizen. Mind you, I don't want everybody moving in with me. It'd be a bit crowded.
I was going to say, there's only you that's a Fockham Hall citizen. How can anybody else get a Fockham Hall passport?
Well, I was thinking you could be a bit like, Sealand. Have you heard of Sealand?
Mm-hmm.
Where you can actually get a passport for Sealand, and it's a little, what is it? It's a sort of a platform in the channel, and it's just outside the 3 or 5 mile limit. So it's declared, and you can become So what I'm thinking is, where you live, you don't move in with me, because I don't want about 300 people here. You can be Fockham Hall, so it'd be like satellite states. See my point? So Barbados could be a satellite state of Fockham Hall.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
I'll
be happy with that. Yeah.
Yes. Yorkshire Rose, what was the gist of your comment? Oh, sorry, that was something else. Right. Right, here we go. We got hoping they will get an invite to one of the Rothschilds events, the Muzzlers. Do you get sorry, mate, I don't quite get that one. Do you get it, John?
No.
Hoping they would get an invite. I sort of get it, I think. Yeah, they go get disguised. Don't know. I'll probably see it after the show. I'm a bit of a slow thinker.
Yeah.
Cherries past their best. Are they?
Yeah.
Yes, at the moment, yes. And
I don't mean to be a party pooper, but I've got a lot of information to get through, mate. So.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. No, you weren't.
We'll just do a few more. Just saying, I was looking forward to it, and I was going to email Chris with some information. Yeah, watch out, because my emails are going into spam at the moment for some unknown reason. I don't know what's going on. And Paul Sod sent me an email on the 30th of August, and I've just read it because it was in spam. Right, now we've got a few more here, but I think I agree with you. We've got a lot. We've got a lot to go through. So,
shall I proceed?
Far away. Sorry.
Shall I proceed?
Proceed, yeah, because I said I wouldn't read them all out, but I have.
Up to a certain. I know. Well, this is it. You needed to skip a few there, mate. I'm sorry.
Okay, far away. So, whatever we've got up. Can we recap?
Right, recap was that at this point, Morgan and his co-conspirators then hatched a plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, solve the White Star financial problems, and remove opposition to the Federal Reserve in one fell swoop. So, this involved patching up the wrecked Olympic as best they could, and bracing the twisted keel with metal struts. Now, interestingly, when Robert Ballard allegedly discovered the Titanic wreck site, he actually didn't, but that's another anomalous story. He was puzzled to find these struts, which of course didn't appear on the construction blueprint. Now, interestingly, I'll tell people, for those who think that Robert Ballard discovered the location of the wreck.
Could I cut in there? There's a clue at the beginning because they gave their position, didn't they, in the message? Sorry.
Well, there was, but actually that was the wrong location.
Ah. Sorry.
It was the wrong location. Now, whether they did that deliberately or accidentally, no one knows. No one will ever know. But the point I was making about Robert Ballard discovering the wreck, I mean, they'd allegedly been looking for decades in that location and never found it, right? But I happen to know from my research that they knew all along exactly where it was, and it wasn't there where they said, right from the off. Okay, so the bollocks about Ballard discovering the wreck in 1985 were exactly that. And even Ballard himself said, okay, this is not an exact quote, but this is a paraphrasing of what it said. Right now, Robert Ballard worked for the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, okay, which is on the east coast of America, and it's a maritime organization that do all sorts of maritime research. But also Robert Ballard was, and still is, as far as I'm aware, a CIA agent. Okay, now not a lot of people know that, but that is definitely the case, right? So that is not even up for question. This is documented. Robert Ballard is a CIA agent. Now, what the actual mission was of that vessel that he was on when they allegedly discovered the Titanic wreck, he said, we were actually going to locate the wreck of a nuclear sub, one of our nuclear subs. But we didn't want the Russians to find out what we were doing because they would these are his words, not mine, they would put a satellite on us. So we came up with his idea of searching for the Titanic wreck. So we went and did the submarine stuff, and then we went and found the Titanic, which is a total lie because they'd already found it years and years and years ago. They knew where it was right from when it sank. They knew where it was. I mean, this is a much longer story that I just don't have time to go into the intimate details of this. But just give a little plug from the book RMS Olympic here. It's all in there. All this stuff is in there, and much more besides, much more than I can cover in an hour or an hour and a bit in this talk. So this is of necessity a very condensed version of it. But suffice to say that they already knew where the Titanic was, so Ballard was lying. Right. So yeah, a slight digression there. So, as I say, when Ballard discovered the Titanic wreck and they sent the submersibles down to investigate it, he was puzzled to find the aforementioned metal struts on the keel, which of course didn't appear on the construction blueprints. Now, the only ship that had those keel bracing struts was, of course, the Olympic in the aftermath of the HMS Hawke incident. And it was possible to see those repairs in the superstructure and steel plates that replaced the ones that had been so badly damaged in the Hawke incident in some pictures of Titanic prior to the maiden voyage. Okay, so this actually sets the scene. I think you've all obviously picked up now where this is going. This was the beginning of a remarkable, elaborate scam, which was the switching of the identities of the two ships to avoid the fact that White Star and Herland and Wolff were going to go under, pardon the pun, because of the loss of revenues. So they almost completed Titanic and they almost wrecked Olympic. The identities of those two ships were swapped. Now, this fact is, people. I get a lot of criticism for this. I get a lot of people, and in fact, there's actually a website on the internet by a guy called Dan the Cameraman, that absolutely tries to debunk all my work on this. Now, I don't know who this guy is, but he's an idiot, right? I spent 3 years looking at this stuff, and I haven't made any of it up whatsoever. But him, in the space of a few pages of his internet website, has tried to debunk everything that I've researched. Okay, now I know that for a fact that the ships were switched because I spent a week in Belfast interviewing the descendants of some of the ship workers' families. They had that story passed down to them through their families. And, every one of them said that, independently, because none of them knew each other, that their grandfather, great-grandfather, whatever it was, had told them that they were warned and made to sign a document to say that if ever that information got out and it was seen to come from them, they would never work again, and neither would any of their families, not just for Harland and Wolff, but for any employer anywhere ever. Okay? And they all said the same thing. Now, they weren't lying. I mean, you can tell when people are lying. I mean, what reason would they have to lie? I mean, all we get from it is, as with everything else, when you try and expose a so-called conspiracy theory, you get grief. It's not something that people do for gratification or for self-aggrandizement. They do it because they feel they want the truth to come out. And these people are absolutely telling the truth. So anyway, on with the story. So how was this deception carried out? Okay. After Olympic's accident with HMS Hawke, she spent, as I said, many weeks, around 8-9 weeks, in the shipyard at Belfast alongside Titanic, and the changes were made piecemeal. They were basically identical anyway, but there were some slight differences. But the layman wouldn't notice, and this is how they covered it up, because even the shipyard workers probably didn't even take any notice of the ships. But the main differences in the two ships were eradicated, and then they made them as identical as possible, although it was not 100% foolproof. And this is how the plot was discovered, through meticulous research, because it's like anything else. Whenever any action that anybody makes in any kind of criminal endeavor, it always leaves a footprint of some kind. And this is how murders are solved. This is how all crimes are solved, because there are clues left by the people who perpetrate it. There are photos showing them in various stages of transition, the ships, and it's quite easy to follow that through and see where the changes were being made and when. Now, the detractors to this story, i.e. the people who support the official bollocks, will say, oh, the photos don't prove anything, blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm sorry, but the photos absolutely prove that the switch was made. So anyway, they made the changes. The details of the changes, again, they're in my book. And then the final thing that they did on one final weekend, the last changes were made, and that was that they switched the lifeboats. And the only other things that needed to be changed, because everything else was typical standard White Star issue. There were no names on anything else other than the menus, the letterheads, and of course
that was a White Star, wasn't it? They didn't put
exactly, and of course the ship nameplates. Now, this was carried out by a small crew of insiders, and these men were paid £100 for a weekend's work. But, as with everyone else, they were also threatened with a loss of livelihood in the event of their spilling the beans in any way. Right, okay. Now, significantly, Olympic's maiden voyage was in June 1911, and I say significantly because this was done amongst absolutely no fanfare whatsoever. Now, contrast that with Titanic's unveiling, maiden voyage, and there was a massive fanfare, massive hoo-ha about Titanic. Now, why would that be? Olympic was the first one off the production line. Olympic was the big one, if you like, the big, new, dramatic kid on the block, if you like. And I've looked through all the contemporary newspapers. There's one or two column inches about it, but nothing. Now, Titanic was absolutely emblazoned all over the papers. This is a big thing, the Titanic. And the reason for that, I believe, was to attract the great and good in huge numbers to the Titanic's maiden voyage, for which this will become clearer as the story progresses. And there's still quite a lot to get through, so I'm going to plow on for a little bit longer, Chris, if you don't mind.
That's perfectly okay. Yes.
Yeah. If you've got any questions, fire away. But
well, I'm going to remind you about the propeller.
Oh yeah, no, not yet. Not till right at the end.
And there's some in chat, but I think we'll leave that to a little bit later. I'll have to skip a few. I'm terribly sorry. I hope people don't take offense.
Yeah, I apologise too, but there is an awful lot of information to get through here. I'll try and condense it into a reasonable amount, reasonable time span. But just to let everyone know, I once did an overnight podcast about 4 years ago, which was people from someone on the west coast of America. So it was like during the night. So I got up at like 3 a.m. to do it. And that lasted 4 hours. And I still didn't cover everything. So you can understand the problem that I've got. All the information is in my book. And I'm sorry to keep plugging it. But
what is the name of the book, please?
RMS Olympic.
That's it.
RMS Olympic. Okay.
RMS Olympic.
So
Okay.
right. So what happened actually was that Titanic was launched in December 1911. It was renamed the Olympic, and work continued on the original Olympic, which was now Titanic, to make her seaworthy enough for one dramatic final voyage. Cue dramatic music. So there are so many conflicting photographs of the two in various stages of both official and even unofficial changes that even so-called experts or self-styled experts struggle to separate the two. And of course, most photos have no dates, especially in those days. And if surreptitious changes were being made alongside official ones, then the conclusion has to be that photos prove nothing at all. Well, they certainly don't prove that no switch was made. On the contrary, they prove that the switch was made. So, on Wednesday, the 10th of April, 1912, Titanic left Southampton on its maiden voyage. Titanic, Olympic, which is now Titanic, left Southampton on its maiden voyage for New York amidst huge celebration. Calling it had 2 ports of call after Southampton before it sailed on to New York. It called at Cherbourg in France and Queenstown in Ireland. And it had 2,200 passengers and crew on board. Now, most people think that it was full, but actually it wasn't full. It was half full, right? And I'll cover a little bit more about that very shortly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody says, oh yeah, it was absolutely full, but no, it wasn't. And there still wasn't enough lifeboats, even though it was only half full, which is absolutely scandalous, isn't it? Okay, so but just backtracking from that slightly, sorry. What I should have said was that all new ships, of which Titanic was allegedly one, have to have a Board of Trade certificate of seaworthiness, and to achieve that, they had to have what were called sea trials on open seas. Now, interestingly, Olympics, when Olympic was launched, and any other ship, it had to do these sea trials on open seas, and these took a day. And they used to do things like test the turning circle, the braking, or whatever, the everything, the handling of the ship, the safety of it, the water.
Like an MOT.
Water tank. Yeah, like an MOT, before it was allowed to carry passengers. So Olympics took one day, a full day out on the open sea. Titanic's, draw your own conclusion, lasted 2 hours on the River Lagan in Belfast. Yeah, so that then it was signed off as being seaworthy. It's interesting, that, isn't it?
On the River Lagan in Belfast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can, it's all checkable stuff. This is not me making it up. Now, also at this point in time, when the Titanic sailed on its maiden voyage, this was right in the middle of a coal strike. At that point in time, there'd been a coal strike throughout the UK for the last 6 weeks, and there was no coal to be had for any of the liners. There were lots of liners laid up, lying empty all around the different docks in the UK. So, by the time the Titanic sailing, as I said, the coal strike going on for 6 weeks, and passengers were desperate for berths across the Atlantic. They couldn't get berths for love nor money. Yet Titanic sailed half full. And also, interestingly, the transit crew, who were the crew that were responsible for the safe passage of the liner from Belfast to Southampton before its maiden voyage, so before it took on any passengers. Now, out of those, there were 100 and odd below decks workers, i.e., the stokers and the engineers and all the in the bowels kind of employees, those kind of people. There were 100 and odd of those, and only 2 signed on for the maiden voyage. Now, bear in mind, this is extremely significant because don't forget these people have been out of work for weeks. Because in those days, you were only paid if you're a ship worker, you were only paid from the moment you walked up the gangplank to begin the voyage until you walked down the gangplank at the end of the voyage, and nothing else. Your pay started and stopped at those specific points. So there were people who've been out of work for weeks, and yet these guys weren't interested. Okay, they weren't interested before the maiden voyage. They knew that was the Olympic and not the Titanic, without a doubt. Now, of those two that did sign on, both of them jumped ship when it got to Queenstown in Ireland, which was the second stop after Cherbourg. So all they did was they signed on just to get back home, basically. So I believe that they all knew exactly what was going on.
So they had to get a crew that did not know, I suppose.
Well, I think maybe they didn't know, or they were so desperate. But obviously the ones that had brought it down from Belfast to Southampton, which is like about 600 miles, 600 nautical miles, they had seen for themselves exactly what the state of the engine rooms and the boilers was, and the actual innards of the ship. So maybe people just signed up, as you say, either not knowing or willing to take a risk that it wasn't as bad as they suspected. But these guys had seen it, so I believe that's exactly what happened. I'm noticing that time's going on really quickly, and I've got such a lot to get through. Okay. Do you want to go and chat for very briefly?
Quick, if you don't mind, we do a hop, skip, and jump because
we're
going to
absolutely, have. Yeah. I'm sorry to everyone who we can't answer everything because
lots of people are giving me lots of advice about vitamins. Thank you very, very much. And
about what vitamins?
I'm in vitamins Canada. Maybe we could send some of the legal stuff out. That's a very kind offer, but we won't go into it on this program. But that's a very kind offer. Thank you very much. And because you've got to be careful on YouTube and anywhere else. Now what we got here? We go down. I'm just trying to see if there's anything different. Oh, here. Aren't there different portholes on the liners? That's an interesting.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the differences. When the Olympic was launched, it had 16 portholes on the port, which is the left side, those who don't know, on the port bow, and Titanic only had 14. And yet, after the disaster, Olympic had suddenly lost 2 of the portholes and was only 14. And yet the wreck under the sea has 16. So just more circumstantial evidence.
Yorkshire Roads, was the Titanic called unsinkable at the time? Well, I can answer that one.
It was, but to be fair, that was the press that said that. It wasn't the company that said it. The company never claimed it was unsinkable. It was the press that dubbed it the unsinkable liner. And they only said that because it had got these innovative bulkheads which separated the hull of the ship into compartments. But the problem was the bulkheads didn't go up high enough. If they'd gone up another 20 feet, then the ship wouldn't have sunk. But unfortunately, what happened was as the water poured in underneath, it began to sink by the head. In other words, it went down at the front like that. And what happened was all the water from the compartments at the back spilled over and over and filled up the compartments one by one, and it just sent it down like that. But so it wasn't unsinkable at all. But it was just a press gimmick, they said, "Oh, the unsinkable Titanic." Blah blah blah. Yeah.
Interesting. There's two questions here. Titanic had a fire in a bunker.
It did.
Set off. Yes, I know that.
It did. Yeah, absolutely.
And the other one here is, this is an interesting one from Yorkshire Rose. By the way, thank you, Yorkshire Rose. I hope you don't think I'm great, but that's a very kind offer. So thank you very much. I visited the Titanic Museum at Cove, Queenstown in Ireland. The last place the Titanic stopped. The list of dead showed few of the wealthy, but long lists of whole families of working class.
Correct, because it was the third class passengers that bore the brunt of it. They weren't allowed into the lifeboats. In fact, they were locked below decks. There's a scene in the famous film Titanic with Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio where it actually shows the gates being locked, so the third class passengers couldn't come up on the deck.
That was true, wasn't it?
That bit was actually true. The rest was absolute bollocks, but that bit was actually true.
The Kenneth More one was bollocks as well, wasn't it? Because that was written by that CIA bloke.
That was written by Walter Lord. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just a couple more, and it's just here. So the Olympic was the Titanic's ship-to-ship.
Correct.
Right. People have dived on the war grave. On that war grave, it's not a war grave. To see.
No, I think you're thinking of the Lusitania, Rob. The Lusitania was a similar incident, but that's a whole different story. I mean, it's another lie as well, of course. But it's the Lusitania that's a war grave, and they and they have dived to see whether it was how it was sunk, but it was a torpedo. But the problem was with the Lusitania, and this is a real big digression, was that the Lusitania was actually carrying massive cache of arms. And funnily enough, last week I had a phone call from a guy in California who saw my piece on the Lusitania on my website, and he phoned me up to confirm that my assertions were correct, because his granddad was took part. In fact, he supervised the loading of goodness knows how many tons of TNT onto the Lusitania, and yet both governments, British and the American governments, denied that it was carrying arms. But it was carrying arms, and that's why it was a legitimate target for the U-boats, and that's why it was sunk. But that was just an attempt to get America into World War One. Sorry, that's a massive digression. I do apologise.
Right, very quickly. Sod the time in the comments. I like 4-hour shows. That's normal to me. Lightweights. Yeah, well, I think I could take you to the original White Star booking office.
I've seen it. I've been there, mate. I've been there. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Flats now.
Spent a lot of time in Southampton. Yeah.
Maybe Lusitania, the hospital ship.
No, the hospital ship was Britannic, RMS Britannic, which was Titanic and Olympic sister ship.
Right.
Lusitania was sunk off the coast of Ireland. Britannic was sunk in the Aegean Sea. That was also by a torpedo.
And that woman that was went down with
all
Jack
three
Cousteau.
ships.
Jack Cousteau. She was on all 3 ships, wasn't she?
Yeah, that nurse. Yeah.
Bit unfortunate, isn't it? Really. I wouldn't sail with her. Right. Shall we carry on? So let's recap. So the crew. This is the thing that's getting me. They couldn't. There was mass unemployment in those days, and they couldn't get people who were around the docks at that time.
They had trouble getting a crew, because obviously the word went round, but I think some people were willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
So as I say, lots of liners were laid up and lying empty. They were scattered all over every single port in the UK. They couldn't get coal, but somehow the Titanic managed to beg, borrow, and steal 6,000 tons of coal, which is what was needed to get it across the Atlantic. 6,000 tons it used to take to get those big ships across the Atlantic. And the strike had been ongoing for 6 weeks, and passengers desperate for berths, but they only offered half of the berths. Now, there were people that had been booked on other ships who couldn't sail because they had no coal. They were only offered, when they tried to get berths on Titanic, first class passengers were only offered second class. Now, first class was half empty. The reason they did that is because they knew that any self-respecting first class passenger would never accept a second class berth. So what they were doing, they were restricting the numbers, and we'll come on to that. Right now, 5 days.
I know that. That's incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. 5 days before Titanic sailed, a ship called the Californian had departed for New York from London, again in the midst of a nationwide coal strike and shortage. Now, Californian was part of another of Morgan's shipping companies called the Red Star Line. Okay, and this was captained by a guy called Stanley Lord. Now, we will come on to that very soon. Now, interestingly, the top speed of Californian was half that of Titanic. So what that meant was that, purely by coincidence, I'm sure, they both ended up in the ice field in the Atlantic at exactly the same time, because Titanic left 5 days afterwards. So this ship, the Californian, had sailed from London, and interestingly, it had no passengers at all, despite the huge demand for transatlantic passengers, and no cargo at all, except for 3,000 woolen sweaters and 3,000 woolen blankets. Okay. As I said, even, I think that's pretty significant. In fact, as I said, Titanic was only half full when there was a huge demand for places. First class passengers hoping to transfer to Titanic were only offered second class cabins, and basically it was an attempt to keep the numbers manageable. So on the evening of the 14th of April, the day of the disaster, the Californian stopped dead in the middle of the ice field, where Titanic was due to pass shortly, and drifted with the ice while keeping all its boilers fully fired. Now, 3 experienced transatlantic sea captains gave evidence at the American inquiry that it was absolutely not common practice to stop or even slow down in ice fields, except very occasionally in extremely foggy conditions. And this was a very clear night. It was the clearest night that anybody could remember on the North Atlantic. Because icebergs are extremely visible and thus avoidable even at normal cruising speeds. So, on Sunday the 14th of April at 11:40 p.m. local time, Titanic allegedly, and I use that word advisedly, hit an iceberg and sunk 3 hours later with a loss of 1,503 lives. Was there actually an iceberg? Well, I do believe there was an iceberg in the vicinity. There were several. But did Titanic actually hit an iceberg? Well, that is absolutely debatable. And there was a lot of ice on the decks. We heard lots of stories from passengers and all the apocryphal stories about people making jokes about, run out on deck and get me a piece of ice from a whiskey or whatever. And, the stories about the third-class passengers, the young guys playing football on the deck with big lumps of ice that had come off the iceberg when it scraped it. But all the ice on the decks, what happened was, at one point in the incident, the ship's engines were thrust into reverse. Okay. So it was going at top speed or full speed, and the engines were thrust into reverse abruptly. So now, on the Titanic itself, there were lots of outbuildings on the deck, and there was lots of overhead rigging and wiring, and there was a huge wireless area which ran the entire length of the ship. It was like there was a mast at the back and a mast at the front, and between that was strung a wire which acted as the wireless area. Now, don't forget, this was an extremely cold night. It was well below freezing, and there was massive masses of ice on the ship. So what about this for an idea? Is it possible that thrusting the ship's engine into reverse shook loose lots of, large amounts of ice from the miles of overhead rigging and wiring?
Yes.
And is that where the ice came from? Now,
yeah.
The other element to that is, now, all ships went out at sea at that time. The forward 2 lifeboats on the front, on both the port and the starboard side, the right and the left side, had to be swung out over the edge of the ship itself. Now, that was a safety feature in case of a man overboard or a woman overboard, politically correct. And that was how they sailed, with the lifeboats swung out over the edges. Now, we know that the iceberg allegedly hit on the starboard side, the right side. We know that lifeboat was totally undamaged, because it was used successfully in the rescue of several people. Number 1 lifeboat. And, this is documented. We know that it's a fact. It's beyond dispute. So imagine if the ship scraped along the iceberg, which is what we're told happened, and surely that lifeboat would either have been damaged or dislodged or both. You couldn't actually scrape an iceberg and not hit the lifeboat that was swinging outwards. And as I say, all the ice on the decks could have been the result of the shaking loose of large amounts of the stuff off the ship itself. Now, also, the damage to Titanic itself was very, very strange. Now, the steel plates had a 15 centimetre, which is about 4 inches, something like that, 4-inch wide puncture that at some places penetrated.
That's 6 inches actually, 150.
Sorry?
150 millimeters is 6 inches.
6
So
inches,
6 inches,
okay.
6 inches thick.
6 inches then. So, okay, we're looking at that, aren't we? Yeah. And then at some places it penetrated 1.6 meters, which is about 5 feet, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, into the inner skin of the ship. Now, that would have needed a really bizarrely shaped ice outcrop on an iceberg to achieve that, and one that would surely have snapped off in contact with steel. I mean, I know that ice is very, compact ice is very, very strong. In fact, in some cases, it can be as strong as steel itself or stronger. But not something that wide, and 1.6 meters long.
With a double skin, which
Yeah,
would
it just, I mean, that
protect it.
just didn't make any sense to me.
Well,
Yeah.
something made icebergs are 3/4 submerged, so it was big enough to have ice hit the decks. That means it was massive underwater. Yes, but what happens is that's Rob Random. Kevin Keener said, "Minds come to mind, come to
Well,
thoughts."
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't know. It could have been the fire in the bunker that caused an explosion that sank it, but that's not controlled. I mean, there's no control to that. Same with a mine. There's no control to that. Now, this wasn't an accident. I absolutely believe this wasn't an accident.
I agree with you, but there is a theory that what happened is because of the fire in the boiler, it weakened the steel by about 80%. This is metallurgists look at this. So if it was an iceberg, it would have sort of ripped the side off, a bit like opening a sardine can. Just thought. So
Yeah,
that is one
But the
theory.
problem,
But it wasn't an
that is not controllable. They need it to make sure. Much like when Princess Diana died, they had to make sure that she died. An accident in a car wasn't going to kill her, was it? In fact, she actually walked away from that.
In the safest car that there is, which is a Mercedes. Or Volvo's the safest.
Yeah, she did actually walk away from it. All that bollocks about her being unconscious and never recovering consciousness and dying on the way to hospital.
There's a picture of her, isn't there, walking around somewhere?
Well, there was TV footage of it, but of course that's probably been destroyed long ago now. But yeah, there was. Anyway, that's digressing.
Yes.
But to get back to the damage on the ship, what I actually believe, because there is something called the yellow funnel steamer which makes an appearance. Several passengers said that at the time of the incident, there was a smaller ship which they referred to as a yellow funnel steamer passing by, and not just like in the distance, but like right next to the ship. Now, whether this had some kind of contraption on it that caused the damage, I don't know. But I'm absolutely certain in my own mind, after 3 solid years of research on this, that this was not accidental damage. This was a deliberate ploy to sink the ship. They had to make sure they couldn't trust it to chance like a mine or something like that. That wasn't necessarily going to sink the ship. They had to make sure that it was something concrete that was going to do it. Now, let's just change tack slightly here. In my book, RMS Olympic, I describe an intrinsic connection between the sinking of the Titanic and the formation of the Federal Reserve Bank. And this is what I was referring to at the beginning. This is the second strand of the story. Now, the Federal Reserve Bank was actually instigated in the US in 1913. So what happened was, in 1910, 7 prominent financiers representing various financial organizations met incognito at a place called Jekyll Island, which is off the coast of Georgia, USA, not Georgia, Russia, to hatch a plan to usurp the power to create money from the American government. Now, the result of this was to be the Federal Reserve Bank, which, as I said right at the beginning, is equivalent to the Bank of England in the UK. However, this plan was not universally popular, shall we say, and it wasn't without strong opposition from certain mega-rich people. Now, there were 4 guys who were specifically opposed to it. Now, one of them was John Jacob Astor. Another one was a guy called Benjamin Guggenheim. Now, John Jacob Astor was regarded as being the richest man in the world at that time. Benjamin Guggenheim, who was a mining entrepreneur, a guy called Isidor Straus, who made his fortune through retail and financial interests, and another guy called Charles Lindbergh Sr. Now, Charles Lindbergh Sr. was a congressman. He was the father of the famous aviator, the guy who flew the Spirit of St. Louis plane across the Atlantic. Now, this wasn't the opposition wasn't due to any kind of altruism on their part, for the common people, but because they knew that the Federal Reserve Plan would mean soaring inflation, because that's how central banks work, and inbuilt debt, which goes along with it, and that would severely impact their own fortunes, because the way that the Federal Reserve creates money is that first of all, it creates it out of thin air. It prints the notes, passes them to the government of the country involved, in this case, the United States. And every time more money is passed into the financial system, shall we say, that creates inflation. And what does inflation do? It reduces the value of money. These guys were extremely wealthy, and they knew exactly what would happen, that their fortunes would be diminished by it. So that's why they were fighting, not because they knew that it was bad for the people. So these four guys created a strong resistance movement, which was beginning to win the battle against the Federal Reserve conspirators. Now, 3 of these men actually died on the Titanic. Coincidence? Well, I don't know. And this is why what I said before about the rich and famous being lured in great numbers to this hyped-up maiden voyage by J.P. Morgan, who, by the way, mysteriously failed to show at Southampton docks in time for the departure of the ship, because he planned to be on the maiden voyage. And not only J.P. Morgan, but around 50 of his friends and colleagues didn't show either. So I believe what happened, and there's lots of circumstantial evidence for this, is that he lured Astor, Guggenheim and Strauss on board by personal invitation and by booking a passage for himself. There's a kind of a parallel story to this, and it's the biblical story about, anybody who knows the Bible, about King Herod, who used to lure his rivals to parties, then left the party, barred the doors, and set the place on fire. So it's a similar kind of scenario to that.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's have a look at how the accident was facilitated and how they expected to pull off the deception. Well, I say accident, that's a very loose term. I don't believe it was an accident at all. Now, I believe that Stanley Lord, the aforementioned Stanley Lord, who was captain of the Californian, the ship in question that was waiting patiently in the ice field for the Titanic to show up, I believe that Stanley Lord was in on that plot because, as I said, the Red Star Line, who were his employer, was also owned by J.P. Morgan. Now, interestingly, several years previously, I discovered, Stanley Lord had successfully evacuated 2,000 people from a ship in under an hour in a military exercise. So he got perfect credentials for the job, hadn't he? Yes. Because I believe it was the intention of Morgan to save most of the passengers and allow a select few to become victims to cover up the disposal of the Federal Reserve conspirators. Now, and the idea was that the Californian would be standing by, complete with those 3,000 blankets and 3,000 sweaters to pick up most of the survivors. Now, several passengers said afterwards, and this is documented stuff. This is quotes in newspapers who aren't exactly renowned for telling the truth, but obviously they weren't going to make this stuff up. They were told by the passengers said and quoted that they'd been told by White Star Line staff in the immediate aftermath of the accident that the Californian was on its way to pick them up. Yet Californian had shut down its wireless, and it was totally incommunicado 19 miles away, as I say, with its wireless switched off and beyond visible contact. And there'd been no communications at all, because I checked the wireless telegraph messages between Californian and Titanic at all at that point, or indeed ever. So how did the officers and staff of Titanic know that Californian was on its way to pick them up? Okay, right.
Interesting. It all adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I haven't got to the absolute bottom of it. All I have done is come up with is uncovered facts that prove that the official story is far from correct. Okay.
Well, it stinks, doesn't it? The official story. So,
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And more than one eyewitness swore that they'd seen this yellow funnel ship, which I referred to, directly alongside at the time of the incident. And this is known as the Yellow Funnel Steamer mystery amongst Titanic books. This ship was seen in the vicinity of Titanic at the time of the sinking by crew members and also crew members of the Californian. And indeed, when the Carpathia, which was the ship that actually picked up all the lifeboat survivors, there was a lot, funnily enough, and this is a real anomaly, this one, but you never hear about it in the mainstream myths. A lifeboat was seen to be floating there, an empty lifeboat. There was a totally different colour and design to those of the Titanic. So where the hell did that come from? Was it knocked off the Yellowford steamer in the incident? Who knows?
Could it be a limpet? I mean, we don't know, but it could. It's a thing called a limpet mine. Sorry, a limpet mine that they can put on the side of ships. I'm not sure they were actually invented at that time. I think it's more of a.
I don't know.
It sounds like. I mean, they could put anything really to explode. They could put loads of explosive charges on the side, I would have thought.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Possible. Yeah. Do you want to do a bit of chat again?
Certainly, there's some very interesting stuff. Now, it says here, the missing Malayan, this is Paul Craven, plane 370, had 4 patent holders of a certain micropressor.
Correct, yeah.
And the 5th holder was a child. Maybe something similar with the Titanic.
Possibly, yeah.
And Stewie has said, big shout out for Eustace Mullins, good old Eustace, says, Secrets of the Federal Reserve, worth reading. And was it Death by Injection? And, this is ridiculous. Di works at my local garage. Grace, of course it's ridiculous because she works at Tesco's.
Yeah,
haven't you been to my local branch at Tesco's?
She swaps shifts with Elvis occasionally, I believe, doesn't she, Rob?
Yeah, she's on the delicatessen counter, you know. I saw her having a quiet cigarette the other week, so, you know. I like that one, Rob. Yeah, she looks at local Greg's. Yeah, blimey. She can film our sandwiches. Now we got here Rob Random. Why would a conspiracy to eliminate certain people involve so many people, i.e. captain, staff, etc.? It would not work and seems a lot of work to get rid of so few.
Yeah, it's a good question. But in my view, I believe that it was too risky. Even for these people who are renowned for all this kind of crap, it was too risky for them to, arrange 3 separate accidents for these guys. It would have just looked. I don't think they could have covered that up. There would have, that would have been too obvious. So I think Morgan saw an opportunity because he knew he was going to sink the Titanic, and he thought, okay, well, we can use this to our advantage. Because who the hell would suspect, in the aftermath of a disaster, that these guys had been murdered, which I absolutely believe they were. And just let me say this, 2 of their bodies were never found. Guggenheim and Strauss, their bodies were never found. There are all sorts of legends about what happened to them after the incident, but no one really knows exactly what happened to them, and the bodies were never found. Now, Astor's body was discovered a few days later because they sent out a rescue ship from Canada to try and to try and retrieve all the dead bodies in daylight, rather than try and do it in the dark, which wouldn't have been very practical. So they sent out this rescue ship called the Mackie Bennett from Halifax in Canada, and Astor's body was found, but he was only identifiable by the documents in his pocket. His face was a bloodied mess. His face had been battered in.
Because apparently the rescuers, they had to be married and they got paid double the amount or something, didn't they? There was something about the people that went out that they had to be psychologically tested or something because they knew they were going to be picking up some pretty horrible sights.
Yes.
So these blokes had to be mature. They didn't have immature people.
Yes.
But that is, it all seems to idea. Because when you look at these things, the conspiracy, you look at when they were doing I know we talked about nuclear bombs and all that, but that project, what's it called now? The Alamos, before World War II, with supposed to be the bomb. Nobody knew anything about that.
No.
And look at the way they got away with the moon thing. It was a need to know basis. And I've worked on projects that were need to know. Don't worry, I was at the very lowest level. So it's just and I actually worked on a project that was hush hush. I was a contract bloke. I hadn't signed the Official Secrets Act, and I had to put in a question, simple question like, which way does this door swing? And I got a question back, why do you wish to know? Because I'm designing it. But no, they can. It's very, very easy to do things on a
Yeah.
need to know basis.
Absolutely. It's a piece of cake. These people are masters at it, as we know. Anyway, moving swiftly onwards, because I'm very conscious of time marching on.
I understand. It's at 1 hour 19 at the moment, so we've got to be a little bit careful. And we could carry this on for a second part.
No, it's not worth it. I mean, I can probably finish in about 20 minutes if that's okay. Possibly.
Because it's fascinating. Because we got to this interesting part where Astor's body was battered, or his face was battered.
Yeah, he also had $10,000 in his pocket. So
a lot of money in those days.
Yeah, it was a lot. It's a lot of money these days, but in those days, it was an absolute fortune. Yeah, I mean, when people earned like, $5 a week or whatever, it was an absolute fortune.
Numbers.
Anyway, so yeah, look a little bit at the aftermath now. As I said, the Carpathia, which was about 4 hours away, was the only ship that they could raise, or the nearest ship that they could raise to actually pick up the survivors. Californian was dead in the water, to all intents and purposes. Its wireless was switched off. They weren't receiving any messages for whatever reason. And please don't ask me why. I have absolutely no idea. But Carpathia picked up all the survivors around 3 hours after the ship sank, and there were about, I think, 705 survivors out of 2,200 and something. So about a third, just under a third, survived. Now, interestingly, the Carpathia, which had allegedly steamed for 3-4 hours to pick them up, 4 hours, was fitted out like a hospital ship and had 7 doctors on board. Which, I mean, don't ask me any questions on that. I just don't have a clue. I'm only telling you what I found out. Okay. And obviously, when it got the survivors back to New York, a lot of the witnesses, a lot of the White Star crew were subpoenaed as witnesses in the American inquiry. Now, both the American and the British inquiry were widely thought to be whitewashers. No surprises there. I mean, there was no witnesses called from the passenger contingent, except for the Gordon family of the famous gin company. And no witnesses were allowed to give personal evidence and were strictly forbidden from speaking, other than to give simple answers to direct questions, no elaboration. If they tried to elaborate, they were shut down. And interestingly enough, when Californian eventually reached New York and Stanley Lord was questioned by the press, he said, and I quote, "I am not allowed to give out state secrets. You will have to ask those in the office."
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then upon the arrival of the surviving crew members back to England 2 weeks later after the disaster, they were all illegally detained overnight in a holding pen at Plymouth docks without access to legal or union representation, and coerced into signing a document that they believed was the Official Secrets Act. So, let's examine the iceberg thing again, just very briefly. I mean, did she really hit an iceberg? There were only 5 eyewitnesses, believe it or not, to the actual incident. Murdoch, who was the first officer, the 2 lookouts in the crow's nest, the helmsman, and 1 other ordinary seaman. Now, significantly, Murdoch, I believe, was allegedly committed suicide in the aftermath of the collision, having already shot several passengers. Now, so that left only the 4 working class witnesses. And I say working class, that's significant, because how easy was it to keep working class people quiet in those days through threats to their and their families' future livelihoods? So, was Titanic set up by Captain Smith on the orders of J.P. Morgan to enter an ice field at high speed with the intent of ramming her with the yellow funnel steamer, which could well have been an icebreaker or some such thing, in order to provide a plausible cover story, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and collect the insurance payout for the wrecked Olympic, i.e. the Titanic, and also to rid the Federal Reserve conspirators of their powerful enemies? There were 6 significant deaths: Captain Smith, Chief Officer Wilde, I'd say First Officer Murdoch, all of whom I suspect, due to the evidence I've uncovered, to have been privy to that plan, plus Guggenheim, Strauss, and Astor. There's no real eyewitness evidence of what happened to them at all. According to the official legend, none of them attempted to escape. None of these people attempted to escape. Captain Smith allegedly decided to go down with the ship, very conveniently. Murdoch allegedly shot himself. Guggenheim allegedly, and this appears in all the Titanic legends, he said he was dressed in his best and prepared to go down like a gentleman. Astor apparently just walked away from the lifeboat, never to be seen again, after being denied access to it with his wife. And we're told that Strauss and his wife retired to their stateroom to await death together peacefully. All very convenient, romantic, and melodramatic stuff.
Hollywood.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's highly significant to me that Guggenheim, Astor, and Strauss were all well known to be opponents of the Federal Reserve System, as I've already said in detail. And significantly, perhaps they were also the most well known of the victims, very few of whom, incidentally, were first class passengers. Hardly any first class passengers at all died. It was mainly second and third class that died. In fact, I think there's only something like 2 first class women that died. In the whole of the first class.
This would actually tie up with what Colin was saying about there was. I'll have to ask him a bit more about this, but he said there was said to be a gun battle as the ship was going down.
Yeah, it wasn't actually a gun battle, but I believe that Murdoch shot several passengers who were trying to storm the lifeboats. And then in remorse, maybe, he turned the gun on himself. Because I actually believe that Murdoch was pissed out of his brains, to be honest, as were several of the other crew members who were supposed to be on duty at that time. Because, again, going to detail all this detail in the book, because that, again, what a lot of people don't realise, this is going to be Captain Smith's final voyage anyway. He was retired.
He was incompetent, wasn't he, in his previous voyages?
He's totally incompetent. Again, it's all covered in the book, and there's not enough time to go into it in detail here. Yeah. But he wasn't totally incompetent, and I believe they used that incompetency to get him to comply, because it would have been quite easy for them to say, "Right, Smith, old boy, here's how it's going to be. You're going to help us stage this accident. Otherwise, you're going to lose your pension," because he should have been sacked years previously because he had an appalling safety record. Appalling. And anybody who understands maritime and maritime insurance will tell you that ship's captains, if they were involved in an accident, even if it wasn't their fault, 1 would be maybe okay, but 2, and they were gone. No questions asked, they were gone. But Smith had several really serious accidents. In fact, one of them killed several crew members, and he was deemed culpable, but somehow he managed to keep his job against all the others. And this wasn't because the shipping lines wanted to get rid of them. It was because the insurance companies refused to insure that ship if that captain was going to be aboard. Now, what was going on there? There's several anomalies with the insurance as well, which I'll come on to very shortly. So we're nearly there now. I just need a few more minutes, and then we can finish off with chat if you want.
Finish off with chat and then round it up. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. So it's highly significant to me that the Three Stooges, Guggenheim, Astor, and Strauss, were all well known to be opponents of the Federal Reserve, and so few first-class passengers died. It's a bit of a coincidence that those 3 specifically all died in separate. They weren't together. These are all separate things. So that's quite suspicious. So at the end of the day, Morgan got his insurance payout, and the Federal Reserve came to pass the following year with little to no resistance, because with the death of those 3 guys, and also Lindbergh was bribed $2 million, which is a hell of a lot of money there. It's like almost $250 million today. He was bribed to drop his resistance. And so the Federal Reserve bill came to pass on the 23rd of December 1913, when 90% of Congress had gone home for the Christmas holidays. So it went through on the nod. There was no resistance. And of course, the establishment of the Federal Reserve enabled the elite to begin their next phase of their grand plan in 1914, the following year, and engineer the outbreak of World War One, which, as you know, Chris, it had been in the planning for 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, that might come as a surprise to some people, but they've been planning World War One for 20 years, but they didn't have the finance for it. Well, the Federal Reserve and its ability to create money out of thin air did just that. So, you know, now, interestingly as well, I believe that the Liberal government, the British Liberal government of H.H. Asquith, Herbert Asquith, were complicit in this scheme because they knew that if Olympic had to be scrapped, then Harland and Wolff and White Star Line would have gone too. It's almost certain that Morgan would have cut his losses and pulled out, and the damage to the British economy, the unemployment figures, 30,000 alone at Harland and Wolff, plus several more tens of thousands at White Star, several more thousand associated dependent industries, then the Liberals, who had a very slender majority at that time, would surely have faced a humiliating defeat in the next election, because those unemployment figures would have just gone through the roof as a result of it, as a result of the White Star Line going down. Now, let's go back to the steel struts that were mentioned right at the beginning that I want. Yeah. Now, as reported by Ballard, Robert Ballard, the alleged discoverer, there were some mysteriously unaccounted for in the blueprints thick steel support struts bracing the keel, consistent with the alleged repairs to Olympic after the Hawke incident. So, you know, that's all very convenient as well. Now, there are several other things as well that are just a few points I just want to cover. Just you know, independent anomalies, if you like. There are rumours that it was carrying £1 billion in gold bullion, and the British Navy was actually tracking the ship throughout its voyage, so it knew exactly where the Titanic was and where it sank. You know, the British government sanctioned the cover-up. You know, it was impossible that this all could have happened without the collusion of the government. As I said, the Liberal government of the day knew that if the White Star and Klein and Harland and Wolff were bankrupted, massive political repercussions. 30,000, probably much more, probably 50,000 people out of work.
Remember, Britain was close to bankruptcy.
Exactly.
That's why they got. That's why Lloyd George, who was the Chancellor at the beginning of World War under the Asquith government, got the Bradbury pounds. So
exactly.
So
So the Liberals probably wouldn't have got re-elected, and of course we know how important that is to these bastards, don't we? And equally, if not more importantly, Morgan had agreed upon taking over White Star Line because, significantly, up until that point, no foreign national was allowed to own a British shipping line. So part of the agreement for Morgan taking over was that he agreed that on taking over White Star Line, any White Star Line ship could be requisitioned as troop carriers in the event of war. Now, the British government knew at this time that war was inevitable. Okay, and real history tells us that the financiers have been planning World War I for at least 2 decades, as I said.
Correct.
And the Federal Reserve Bank was a stepping stone to bring this about. Now, in addition, it was absolutely a common scam in those days to switch ships' identities as insurance fraud. Yeah, so this is not an unusual occurrence. This happened a lot. It's just that this is such a famous occurrence that, you know, this is why it's come out. Now, Captain Lord, who was regarded as the scapegoat for this, you know, at the British Inquiry, they declared that White Star Line wasn't at fault, Harland and Wolff wasn't at fault, the crew of Titanic wasn't at fault, you know, everything but reality. And Captain Lord was the scapegoat, the Californian. So what that tells me is that they knew damn well that he was supposed to be, you know, the knight in shining armor that came along to rescue
the passengers.
Yeah. But and he tried for the rest of his long life, and he lived till about 1965. He tried to clear his name, but of course they couldn't allow him to have a hearing because the truth would come out. So he was denied that all his life, and you know, he died broken-hearted apparently, you know, at the age of about 80 odd, because he was desperate to tell his side of the story, but he was never allowed to do that. Now, interestingly as well, a character by the name of Louis Klein enters the story. Now, we know that he exists.
Klein.
Absolutely. Louis Klein, he was called. And he was an Austro-Hungarian seaman who worked for the White Star Line.
Jehovah's Witness, by the sounds of it.
Possibly. But it was Austro-Hungarian. Okay, I think he was actually Austrian. His native language was German. Okay. Yeah. Now, he was a witness to the actual incident. But strangely enough, his name's been expunged from the crew list. But we know that he exists, and we know he was a member of the crew because he gave testimony at the American inquiry. Now, he could speak no English, he says. Well, no, he says. And he says that he shouted a warning to the lookouts to warn them of an iceberg ahead because they saw this iceberg in the head. And he also shouted a warning to the bridge. And, on arrival, he was in New York. He was placed under house arrest and subpoenaed to attend the inquiry, where he escaped during the night and failed to show up. Now, I'm going to end this now with a quote from Louis Klein, which I think is quite significant. No, I'm not going to end it with it. It's almost ending, but let me just read this quote out from Louis Klein. This is what read out at the American inquiry, so I know it's absolutely, the truth as far as he was concerned, but it's never ever appeared in any Titanic legend, and this is very, very significant. Okay, Louis Klein's testimony was, and I quote, "There was a ball following a banquet of some kind going on down below when I went up on watch at 9:30, and the captain and the officers were there with many passengers. After the party, the stewards sent the champagne and wines that were left over to the crew. I know that many of them were drunk. A passenger standing at the rail saw something dead ahead, or maybe a little to the starboard. Look, quick, see the hill over there. I saw it was a big iceberg and ran for the bridge. The third officer was coming along and yelled to me to ask what the matter was. I couldn't stop to answer, I was too excited. I ran for the spar with the crow's nest on it and shouted to the lookout I knew was up there to give the alarm. Not a word did I hear, so I started up the spar. It was less than a minute after I left the promenade deck that I got to the top of the spar and found the lookouts fast asleep. I rang the alarm bell myself." Now, he also said that he went to the bridge and there was no one there. Not a single person on the bridge, not the helmsman, no one, apart from an officer who I believe was Murdoch, the guy who allegedly shot himself, and he was lying motionless on a bench, and Louis Klein believed he was drunk because he couldn't raise him and he smelled very strongly of drink. Now, okay, so that's that. That's extremely significant testimony. And then not me making it up. This is actually the transcript from one of the inquiries, the American inquiry. Right. So there was also something called. No, I won't go into that. It's too complicated. Again, it's all in the book. But
so now, this is very interesting because it sounds to me as if the senior crew members were either drugged or drunk or deliberately.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't make sense of the actual logic of it all, but all I can do is report the facts as I know them. Now, I will finish off with the insurance scam itself. Titanic cost £2.5 million to build, which was obviously a lot of money in those days. It's equivalent to about $250 million today. So the badly damaged Olympic was uninsurable. Now, White Star Line normally insured ships for about 75% of their value. So the payout for Titanic should have been around 1.8 million. In fact, the insurance on Titanic was upped the week before the maiden voyage to 3.2 million. And wouldn't you believe it? The insurance money was paid out in less than a week after the disaster. This is all very reminiscent of 9/11, do you not think, and the insurance on the Twin Towers?
Someone's actually mentioned that in comment.
Okay.
Someone's actually mentioned that. They got there before you.
Ah, right. Okay.
Here it is. It's Cat Holdsworth. She just said, got paid out just like Lucky Larry on 9/11.
Absolutely.
Cat, you're a mind reader.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was... I know I've been speaking for an hour and 40 minutes, and I do apologise for that, but I've out of necessity to condense that into a very, very small nutshell. The actual story itself is way, way more convoluted than that. So,
By the book.
Buy the
We
book.
should,
Yeah,
we should
yeah. I'm
actually
not
have
just saying that because I want you to buy the book. If you're really interested in the entire story, then the story in full is in the book. I've had to miss loads of stuff out.
it all adds up. I mean, look, my attitude. Let's say let us look like we're the jury looking at a crime, and you're just putting the evidence there to make up your own mind. And the evidence there is very strong because I've seen the years ago. I can't remember it really. The Kenneth More film. I've seen that one recent one, not recent. Oh, was it Kate Winslet one? And quite honestly, it does seem to be a bit like everything else, a Hollywood version of what really happened. And the two are very different. World War II, the Hollywood version of what really happened, and Titanic. And it all seems to go along the same thing. Paid off people, and they're very skilled at how to carry these events out, like 9/11, the Titanic. And again, what happened with the Titanic has repercussions today because the Federal Reserve, which is about as federal as Federal Express,
and has no reserves whatsoever.
No reserves whatsoever. They reckon that Fort Knox, Dave Starbuck, I like Dave Starbuck said this. I know I keep on a lot. He had a big influence on me, and he said it's like Mother Hubbard's cupboard. So shall we go into chat and then round off? Absolutely. Okay, we've got quite a lot in chat tonight. Sorry if I don't read yours out. I'm terribly sorry. I'll try and read everybody's, but it's a bit difficult. So I miss you. Don't take it personally. We've got here Aunt Sally. Good evening, chaps. I've been listening on my phone whilst pondering around Sainsbury's. I know you're looking for Lady Di. She works in Greggs. That was mentioned earlier. Yeah, so Rob Brandon said here. There she is. Di works my local Greggs. So you went to the wrong place, Sainsbury's. You've got to go to Greggs to find Lady Di. All right. So we've got Town Crier. Oh, yay, my friend. Sorry I'm late to the party. Hello, Town Crier. I wouldn't say it's strange. A coincidence happened this afternoon. I saw Town Crier's friend on Sunday. I went into the Abbey Health Food store, and who should walk in? Him. Amazing, isn't it? All the hours of the day. So, and it's not that far, I suppose, from Chisholm. Right, here we go. Yorkshire Rose. At Cove, they said that they had bodies washing up on their shores for weeks, and they were buried in Cove. I guess it's that place.
Not heard of that. Well, it's actually spelled C-O-B-H, not C-O-B-E. C-O-B-H, it's pronounced Cove, but that is the new name for Queenstown. Queenstown was renamed Cove in the aftermath of the Irish independence.
Is it?
But I've never heard of the bodies washing up there. How could the bodies wash up in Cove? The bodies would have been taken away by the Gulf Stream, and maybe they did. I don't know, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I accept that, but it might be true.
Yes.
I mean, it was 2,500 miles from Cove. Why would they wash it in Cove? Just the exact place where it happened to.
I've never heard of Cove. Is it in Ireland?
Yeah, but it's not spelled C-O-V-E. It's spelled C-O-B-H. It's on the southeast coast of Ireland, and that is what used to be called Queenstown.
But I wouldn't have thought there'd be much left of them all that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
They disintegrate very quickly, bodies, even in a cold area. Because remember, we're 80% water anyway, so we would have bloat up and then sink.
Yeah. Well, you give them fish food as well. Don't forget. Yes,
that's right. And well, mind you, a few skeletons wash up. It's more interesting than shell collecting. Sorry, it's a bit of a sick black humour joke, that one. Right, deep state. This is Town Crier. Deep state banking cabal. A one-trick pony 9/11.
What's the point of changing a winning formula? They do it all the time, and they know it works. People fall for it every time. So why bother?
What was that? Who was the film? Well, we covered that, wasn't it? The film director.
No, that was James Cameron who did the Titanic movie with Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. He was actually made 33rd degree Freemason on the night that Titanic swept the board with all the Oscars. Won just about swept the board on everything, that film. And he was made 33rd degree Freemason that night.
Apparently, the film costs more than a ship costs.
Oh God, way more. Absolutely, way more. Yeah.
Cat Holdsworth, hello, Cat. All in all, then another massive false flag really is what it was.
Absolutely, Cat. Yeah.
I won't read this out again because we already read that out about Lucky Larry. Cat Holdsworth, laugh out loud, like Man on the Moon and Tower Blocks, unbelievable, really. Yes, that's very, very true. It is all unbelievable. I'm going to have to skip a few here because to tie up. Now let's have a look here. We've got we got here very interesting show. Thank you very much. Thanks. Oh, hello, Susan again. The lady with a nice bike. I've fallen in love with your bike. Again, the swap is still there. If you want, hey, could we do a Titanic with the bikes? No. You see my bike and her bike. No, I don't think we could do a Titanic with that, could we? Nah.
No, they have to be identical, Chris, to be able to do it, or reasonably identical.
Yeah. Well, my sort of 30-year-old wreck next to her beautiful, beautiful bike. That really is fantastic. Right. It was a huge psychological hit, this Yorkshire Rose, on the general public, creating grief and anxiety, uncertainty in people. Look at 9/11. It's all grief, anxiety, and
they do it all the time. Look at the I think we mentioned in a previous show when we talked about the moon landings and NASA, the psyop, the Challenger disaster. That never happened. That was a total psyop. Those people are still alive.
As I said about yeah.
They did it to test. I think they did it to traumatize American school children. But that's a whole other story. Yeah.
You're right. Look at the Saturn V rocket. I mean, if it went up and just went, already standing there, he has to go really impressive and countdown. And say, we're taking off now. Sorry. Right. Thank you very much, Chris and John. Always love these shows. That's very kind. Very kind. And we've got here, great show as well. Thanks, Chris and John. Has John got thoughts on who, what, why with PDI?
Princess Di, I presume she meant. Yeah, I mean.
Oh, yes.
It's on my website.
Greg's.
It's on my website, Yorkshire Rose, the Diana story. It's also in Falsification of History, the book. Yeah, I mean, I tell the whole sordid truth about Princess Di. Absolutely.
Right, we got here Town Cry. Not really. He's bloody in there. Not really. He's always bloody well in. He said that actually. He shot me out. He had Miles said, "Yeah, he's always in here." I tell you so. It's got good vibes. Some places have bad vibes. Some places have good vibes. That has good vibes. It's years old. It must be listed, I'm guessing. And they've got buildings there with jetties and that. It is a little bit, I suppose, a bit like, as I say, that place in Yorkshire. Now, this is Kevin Kennett. My dear old dad always said, if you lie, you better be a good one. Now people are looking into all this, and it's all falling apart. The balls hit, don't work.
The balls hit.
Bullshit, yes. Well, Gandhi said, was it the truth always finds a way through? And it's true, you know. And we got here, what's this? Cat Holdsworth. I love the moon landings with Neil Armstrong and the little Buzz Lightyear or Louis Armstrong, you know. Now, hang on, we got a correction here from Yorkshire Rose. COBH, Cove, you are correct.
Browns Cove. Yeah.
Cove. Never heard of it. I've literally never heard of the place. The body's story was part of the museum there.
Okay.
That's interesting. Thought they were people that had some sort of life raft but were never rescued.
Could well be true, but I've never come across that.
Long way,
Yorkshire Rose, no.
I mean, you know, I'm not into, don't know much about what the sea, but it's a hell of a long way. And we got Stanley Kubrick production, Hatchie. Oh, that was the moon landings, wasn't it? Yes. And we got New World Order as well. Aye. On any other platforms, I heard you had a naughty show. That's right. If you go on to FockhamHallRadio.com, you go on to, and you'll see a link there to our BitChute. channel, and we did a naughty show. But the big problem with going on the BitChute, as I think you'll probably agree, John, we don't get much of an audience on there. It's not as much as YouTube, but we hope to build it up a little bit, you know. Anyway, I think we better tie this up now. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry it went on so long. And it was,
you know, it's very, very kind. And just to tie up, do you know there's a waiting list to come onto this show now? Forget I. Yes, next week we've got Dave, the survivalist and prepper. He's back. Boy, what an impact he made. I went to the stand in the park. Well, it was Sue, you know, the lady with the bike. She's actually got his books, and she had one spare. She gave it out. But I want to add one thing. The book, not Dave's book, it's the book called Food for Free. It's very, very small, but I've discovered, and I'm going to order it on eBay tomorrow, so I'll be able to tell you next week, that there's a bigger book that you can buy of it. So you don't have to sort of squint through it. You can buy a bigger book of Food for Free. So, you know, and then after that, and I think Town Crier, I've probably got it, get him to tell you about the ghost. Oh, now that it ties in. You're a mind reader. This is incredible, because after the Monday after Dave, so we got Dave next week. Okay, so you know he'll be talking about rubbing two Boy Scouts together to make a fire and all that. Sorry, and then I'll put that one in. After that, we got Deborah Hatswell, which will be talking about, and isn't this quite amazing? The paranormal. And we want you to send in your stories of the paranormal. I'm sure he's a mind reader by saying that about the ghost. Now,
what does it actually mean, though? Get him to tell you about what ghost. Get who to tell who about what ghost.
I met in the Abbey Health Food shop.
Oh.
So do you mean Miles? I don't know. I mean, that might be haunted. I don't know, because that's interesting. So if you've got any stories, that's not next week, but the week after, I'll be with Deborah Hatswell. We're talking about that. And the week after that, we might have a surprise. You never know. So we're getting quite booked up on these programs.
By the way, on that note, Chris, can I just butt in?
Yeah.
And say that I had communications with Shannon yesterday. And she will have internet on the 15th of this month.
So we might have a talk with Shannon.
Yeah.
So
she's got some good information to impart, because she's been doing a lot of research and writing for our new book. So you know, which I've been very lax about lately, but she's been beavering away, bless her. So she might have some interesting stuff to tell.
Yorkshire Rose, can we send, or by all means, that's a real good one. Can we send in questions for Dave? Yes, yes. And this is Town Crier saying it was Miles in his shop. So, you know, because I know do you know the lavatory, the public lavatory in Waltham Abbey is haunted. It's haunted by a man that wears leather. Yeah, and you go in there, and apparently he tries to put the willies up the people in the gents' toilets. But sorry, it's a terrible joke, isn't it?
Or is it Tony Blair?
And we got. Oh, hang on a minute. Can you get the Fire of London back on? Yeah, I sent her an email. But she's got the dodgy internet. That's going to be fun, isn't it? Cheeky sod. Is that you?
I've heard rumours about Chris. He does like a bit of leather. Yeah.
No, actually, I don't dress up in Town Crier outfits. Well, oh no, hang on. It's George Michael haunting the restrooms. Right, well, thank you very much, everybody. I really enjoyed tonight. Most of all, thank you, John, for coming on the Titanic. This is we've got a record lot of people in chat. Sorry, I can't read all your comments out. We read them. Don't worry, they're read afterwards. Thanks for your comments as well. And if you don't get an immediate, I'll try and reply to everybody because it's politeness too. But if I haven't replied, don't take it personally. It's just, I'm human. And remember, same time next week, and questions for Dave. Yes, we'll have some questions for Dave, and your paranormal stories for Deborah Hatswell the week after. And whatever happens.
I'm redundant.
No, you don't. No, you don't. No. I was going to say, if you know, no, better not say that. That's going to sound rude. But anyway.
It doesn't usually stop me.
So join us next week, and remember, always have a laugh. That's the most important thing. So see you next week.
Bye everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for joining.
Good night.
Great evening. Thanks.